through the states. I mean, education has always been a state issue, and we communicate pretty well state to state, and there's pretty good competition among the states, and so the idea of accountability was progressing and would have probably developed, in fact, it would have developed even without No Child Left Behind. What No Child Left Behind is it took and jerked everybody over to a system that tried to replicate Texas.
And I'm still not clear on why we needed it.
And that's what I told them. That's why some people say that's why I never went to Washington. Margaret Spellings, who became Secretary of Education, and Sandy Crest came up to me one day at the back of the chamber and said, and I was fixing to go into committee, and I said, whatever y'all do, just leave us alone, please. And Margaret said, you mean you're not ready for us to unleash Paul Sadler on the rest of the country? And I said, Margaret, I'm not sure that what we're doing is right yet. You know, the fact is that changes in education are best judged by long-term results. I mean, there are a few things you can do to have immediate effects, but most of them, you have to see kids go through the system to see what effects you have. The successes we were having in the mid-'90s were a result of things that happened in the '80s, and we were reaping the benefits of those things. And I thought, I'm just not sure that what we're doing is the right way here. So I've spent a lot of time on this issue, and the one truism I can tell you is that successful schools have high parental involvement. I don't care if you're a public school, a private school, or a charter school. Parents that are involved in their system and care about their children and their system do well and have a better chance of succeeding. And here's a key ingredient that you have to remember, that parents have to have a meaningful voice at a meaningful time and place. And if parents don't believe they have a meaningful voice and a meaningful time and place for their children's education, they'll leave. They will take their children and put them in a system that they do. And you'll destroy the public education system. If we remove all of these decisions about curriculum and standards and what our children are learning and when, and we send it to Washington, D.C., if you live around Washington, D.C., that's great. You'll go testify. But if you're from Texas or California or Nevada or Colorado, you can't make that trek. And you'll have the feeling that you've lost control of your child's education. I'm telling you, it will destroy public education.
What you're talking about is happening here today.
It will absolutely destroy public education. You have to give parents a meaningful voice at a time and place if you want to be successful. And so there's a move towards a national curriculum. There's a move towards national standards, and that's the very iteration I was most afraid of. It's not that I don't think that broad guidelines for curriculum wouldn't be helpful. I do think that would be helpful for all of our states. But the decision-making has to be made here. Here's a truism that I learned in that process. Wherever you set the final decision to be made in government, that's where people will gravitate to. If you make the final decision your local school board, people will go to that local school board and they'll live with the result. If you make it the commissioner, they'll go to the commissioner and they'll live with that result. If you make it the state legislature, but if you make it Washington, D.C., you've just excluded about 99% of the public. They do not have the ability to lobby Congress. Not on education.
Is this what people are so frustrated about when they talk about smaller government?
Oh, I think it is. I think in large measure that's exactly what it is. It's let's take the EPA. Okay, there's probably no more frustration in the state of Texas from property owners to business owners than some of the rulings that are coming out of EPA. Now, what is the mission of the Environmental Protection Agency? To protect our wildlife, our environment. Those are good missions, all right? But the feeling in Texas is, by many landowners and by many people in business, is that we're sacrificing humans for some species. Okay? They don't see the connection, and they don't believe that there's fair treatment for them. We want to build some ranch owner who has had property for generations in his land out in West Texas. I mean, they've owned it from a land grant of the Republic of Texas. And they've built fences on it, and they've run cattle on it, and sheep, and oil and gas. And now all of a sudden, there's a particular bird that is close to being put on the endangered species, and they're told you can't build a fence here. You can't do this activity there. And if you want to build transmission from wind energy from West Texas, you can't cross this area because of this habitat. And whether it's right or wrong, it's not the issue. The point is that there are human beings who feel like there's more priority given to a small species than the human endeavor that's occurring. And we're not doing a very good job of listening as a government. U.S. Fish and Wildlife is frustrating to deal with. Who do you contact? Who do you talk to? Who do you talk to for the EPA? In state government, you can at least pick up the phone and talk to the agriculture commissioner, or you can talk to somebody on staff. But if you have a U.S. Fish and Wildlife ruling that affects your property, even finding someone to pick up the phone and talk to you is hard, and it's frustrating. And so it's very much the same thing. Now imagine if that was your child. Imagine if that was your child. It would be so. You would simply do what I'm saying. You would take your child out and you would take it. Even the movie Waiting on Superman, the documentary that was out. If you watch that movie and you watch that documentary, there were parents getting up at 4 in the morning, catching subways across town to get their kids in a certain school. Those were mothers and fathers that cared deeply about their child's education, and that's what was making that child successful. But they were going to take their child someplace where they thought they had a meaningful voice.
Yeah.
And that gets lost in the discussion on education, because everybody asks me, Paul, you did a lot of work in education in Texas. What are you going to do in Washington? And I want to say, it's not that simple. It's not that simple. Part of our problem is that we've tried to wave a magic wand, find a silver bullet, do something in Washington to fix something in Texas. And you can't do that. Not in education. Education uniquely requires a commitment by family and parents and children and teachers and educators on a local level in order to be successful.
I know I'm going to ask a question that's got a long answer to it, but
everything has to be.
But I'm going to ask it for the short answer. But
okay.
Honestly, with all being said, and I know we rank in education, where are we?
48, 47.
Yes. We're going to have to get some more states, so we're not that close to the bottom.
Let's be careful about that.
Okay.
Are you talking about ranked in spending per pupil? Are you talking about ranked in achievement in mathematics and reading? Are you talking about rankings in the 3rd, 5th high school level?
Whoa.
We don't. Well, all right. But see, that's the kind of stuff that's said over and over.
So
we rank 48,
and
that's not.
Paul.
That's not. I know, but it's not true. Okay. Now we're generally, as a state, we are generally at the bottom on funding. Mississippi generally is right below us. We're generally right above Mississippi when it comes to state funding in an endeavor. But, for example, when I was chairman of public education, our 3rd and 5th graders were number 1 or number 2 in the country in reading and mathematics. But you never heard that.
No.
Okay? That's what was called the Texas miracle. You know, Bush put a phrase on it at random because we were knocking the tops out of particularly our elementary and middle school rankings, and it happened after we started disaggregating the data. And with minority kids, we were doing tremendously good stuff. And so you got to be careful. It's like everything else. You got to be careful what you define and how you say it.
Okay, so where's the scorecard? I mean, how do we know, or should we even be concerned with that when we look at our own ability? Although, you know, I personally believe that attracting companies to Texas is largely based on several things. One is whether or not you have the resources to support the company, the infrastructure, and an educated workforce.
It's all of the above, and a favorable tax climate. Because all of those things factor into companies coming to Texas. Let me tell you how I judge our education system. I was asked this by the New York Times, actually. I mean, they came in making a quote kind of like that, saying, "Oh, Texas is horrible," and all that. And I said, "Are you kidding me? We have one of the greatest universities in the country. We have a couple of the greatest universities in the country. We have kids that do extraordinarily well. We're educating. We have one of the, I think, the 7th largest education system in the world. We're educating a lot of kids from a very diverse. We have one school district that has over 170 languages in the one school district. Okay, we've got a lot of challenges, and we're doing a lot of great work. Let me tell you the place you don't go to learn the truth about education: political campaigns. Because nobody ever gets elected by talking about how great we are. All they want to do is talk about how bad we are. Well, I'm here to tell you, we're doing some really great things. We have some great teachers, some great principals, some great school districts that are doing some great things. I judge my public education by my children. Okay? My children had every opportunity to succeed. They could compete with anybody else in the country. They were given the opportunity to learn, and they did. And your children were too. And so I don't know that this blame game or this game of trying to rank people is really all that instructive or that good for us. One of the reasons we moved to the accountability system I talked to you earlier was to give parents more information. So I would know if my kid's at the third, fifth, seventh grade, if it's at the grade level where we want to be. Now, how does Texas rank the other states? So you've got to do some norm referencing. You got to take those tests, norm reference them to other states, and then figure out, are you about the same grade level as everyone else? That's just information you get. But I judge our public school system by walking up and down the hallways. I mentioned earlier I was down in the valley last week. Went to a little church in a Colonias. Spent 2 hours talking to people. And on my own, as I left, I had about 45 minutes. Nobody knows I did it. But I noticed there was an elementary school, John F. Kennedy Elementary School. So I just pulled in. Walked in the front door and introduced myself. Principal wasn't there. Introduced myself to the assistant principal and said, would you show me around? 642 kids. Immaculate. Beautiful school. Clean. Children well behaved. Learning. It can be any school anywhere in the country, and you would be proud for your child to go there. Companion school right next to it, 500 kids, elementary school. It is a reflection of the pride of that community and the importance they place on education. Now, you're going to tell me that that system is failing? I'm going to tell you you're crazy. Go walk the school districts. Go walk the hallways of the schools. Now, we have some school districts that are in trouble, and we have some school districts that aren't doing as good a job as they should. We have individual campuses that are in trouble. But this is a huge system, and by and large, our education system in Texas is very, very good. It's very, very good. Our biggest problem right now in Texas is that our leaders abandon us. Our leaders turned their back on the children of Texas and did not fund education for the very first time in the history of our state. They just flat out... Now, to put that in perspective, because a lot of people outside our state don't know, and some people in the state may have forgotten, we had a rainy day fund with billions of dollars in it. $8 billion worth of money, maybe more than that, I remember now. But way more than what we were missing in education. It had been saved just for the purpose of someday, if the economy turned down, we needed it. We had that money sitting in an account doing nothing. And instead of taking some of that money and covering enrollment growth in this state, they turned their back on children and cut spending in education. And that's why I say they just didn't have the commitment to public education that we deserve. We deserve as Texans. Our kids deserve. They absolutely turned away at a critical time in our state, and they should be criticized for it. Now, why is that important in a United States Senate race? Because David Dewhurst is going to be entrusted, or I'm going to be entrusted, or someone, to be the next United States Senator. And you need to know, if times get tough, is he going to stand up for your kids or not? And his history is, he will promote himself first. The reason they didn't use the rainy day fund is because the Tea Party people didn't want them to, and he knew he had to run in a Republican primary where the Tea Party was going to be part of the vote. And instead of making the hard decision that this is best for our state and explaining it and educating people, he chose the other course. And that's wrong. And that's a judgment call. That's a character issue. That's why it should be talked about and discussed, and that's why it has meaning in the United States Senate race. It is a particularly local issue to Texas. But I expect more from the United States Senator. I expect our United States Senator to have better character than that. And to be willing to make the hard decisions that affect our children and our elderly, our military men and women, and fund them appropriately, clothe them appropriately, do the things that we